So don't get me wrong, I collected a lot of games this year, but I also played a lot because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Hey gamers, welcome to the dojo, and today we're talking about the games that I played in 2024. Now, in truth, this is a series I've been wanting to do at a much more scaled down version. Shout out to YouTubers like Razbiton and so on who get these videos out, and it's always a great way for me to find new games and just see what's out there and find hidden gems. And I've taken notes on games I've played. I have some footage of games I played throughout the year, and I just never saw the light of day. So rather, this is going to be a recap of the games I played throughout the year, and hopefully in 2025 I do a better job of, getting some updates and some titles out there that I enjoyed throughout the year. Now keep in mind, these are games that may have came out in 2024, games that came out prior. It's just games I enjoyed and played throughout the year, and ones that stuck out to me overall. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So to kick off the list at the start of the year, from the Nintendo Switch, I picked up none other than the Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. I had played a lot of Prince of Persia back in the day on the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube. I was a big fan of Sands of Time, and when I heard that there was a new Prince of Persia coming out, I was excited, and I saw that it was going to be a new spin. There was going to be a Metroidvania element to this Prince of Persia game, and The Lost Crown did not disappoint. I picked this up in particular on the Switch, which handled it fine given its console's age, but this is a Metroidvania meets Prince of Persia in its own kind of storyline. You're actually playing as a completely separate character with fun, tight combat, and I think really unique and great bosses and just overall world building. This is one of those Metroidvania games that, factors in the hidden loot and the collectibles and different power-ups to get to different areas and different ways you can get to different areas, all while building on a decent and I'd say overall interesting storyline. But for me, what really made the game was the overall controls and combat. It really just felt satisfactory to beat a boss, and when you developed and learned a pattern of a certain particular boss, being able to beat it using the ability you may have just learned prior or in that kind of section or chapter, it really created that Metroidvania-esque feel that you're getting stronger and better throughout the gameplay. Compact that with collectibles, hidden loot, power-up systems, all these different things, and overall it was just a really, really great experience playing this at the start of the year on the Switch. I will say I wish, and hopefully in the future at some point I'll get it on sale on a more modern console like a PlayStation 5, because I do want the achievements. I'm an achievement hunter, and you'll notice from this list I'm a big single-player fan, so a lot of story-driven sort of content and just kind of that completionist mindset allows me to kind of get more gameplay out of a game. Now, in this case, overall on the Switch, Prince of Persia: Lost Crown, if you are into Metroidvanias and you like the Prince of Persia series, definitely worth checking out. Next up, a release in February that was well known and well anticipated was none other than Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Adding to the storyline of the Final Fantasy VII kind of remake and the whole spin-off or kickoff of the 3 series that are to come for the Final Fantasy reboot. This is classic Final Fantasy, right? And if you are already a fan of the Final Fantasy series, in particular Final Fantasy VII, this is that with a major facelift and advancing that storytelling and bringing in some new elements to the original game. So this is classic Final Fantasy with your typical RPG open world, a lot of storytelling, a main storyline, a lot of side quests and mini games and all the fun random stuff built into that, from Queen's Blood to all other sorts of kind of shenanigans you can get into in games like this. As a Final Fantasy, and in terms of the lineup of the Final Fantasy VII, this delivered. I had a lot of fun going through this and the kind of like 60, 70 hours I spent on the game, and there's just so much more to it, more collectibles, different boss fights you can do and challenges you can do to get a lot more fun and gameplay out of it. But for me in particular, this is just really fun to kind of pick up back on that series and advance that storyline. If you're not a fan of RPGs, obviously this is not going to be for you, and I think RPGs are those things where like you're either into them or you're not, so you'll kind of know. But if you're into the Final Fantasy series at all, then Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is definitely one you'll want to check out. Next up on the list was a Sony PlayStation exclusive that came out in April, and it was none other than Stellar Blade, a game that is a third-person hack and slash sort of Android-esque game that was maybe talked about, maybe called controversy for specific reasons. A game that had a very popular physics engine. And it was a game that, in my opinion, I had a lot of fun just playing through in terms of just the combat, the mechanics, the atmosphere of the game. Made it worth it in itself. I'm on my second playthrough, about like 90% complete on New Game Plus. So I've sunk in a decent amount of hours into it, but truthfully a lot of it was due to the collectibles and the achievement. Again, a game where that achievement mindset and the collectibles just made me go the extra mile and get a lot more gameplay out of it just to check things off of the list. Storyline wise, to me, it was a little bit too predictable. I wish I'd had more time to carve out and kind of character build and develop a bit more. There are optional side quests and things you can do within the game to kind of flesh out the overall story more and learn a bit more about your cast of characters. But I think this is one that could have done a bit more, in my opinion, with the story. However, that said, the combat system, the mechanics, in particular, are one reason I really did enjoy the game. It's one of those parry systems that every time you hit it, it feels satisfying no matter how many times you play through it. And of course, the customization, the soundtrack to this game is one that stuck without me throughout the year, one that I really enjoyed in its kind of eerie, haunting way. And has a DLC actually coming out in like 3 days from now, which is tying it to a very known game that a lot of people said this was adjacent to, which is Nier Automata. So looking forward to checking that out once that DLC comes out. So Stellar Blade, again, April, my pickup, and a game that I dove into. It was just a fun overall hack and slash with, great graphics and physics engine. The next game I dove into, and when I say dove into, I mean really dove into in terms of hours and just the rabbit hole, was a classic Metroidvania, none other than Hollow Knight. I know I'm late on this one, and it's a classic for a reason. I soon quickly learned. This is a game that in all aspects, Team Cherry did their job in terms of storyline, characters, world building, and just overall controls. Again, the tight controls in how you control Hollow Knight and traverse through Hollow Nest, which is just in itself a crazy, sprawling map. This is like the perfect epitome of a Metroidvania in terms of, getting from zone to zone, depending on how you get there, one way or the other, unlocking specific power-ups and abilities to allow you to get to specific areas or finding another way to that specific area. This is a game that had me doing a lot of backtracking, but in a good way, not like necessarily an annoying way, in the sense that a la like Prince of Persia Lost Crown, realizing once you get a specific ability, that's how I can get over that one obstacle or what have you. And again, Hollow Knight, a lot of people have spoken about this. It's just a game that is a masterclass in its combat and its controls and how you play the game. You can play it through a bunch of different ways in terms of how you set up your build and the kind of charms you use and so on and so forth. And then beyond that, it's a game that got a lot of updates, got a lot of love and DLC after the fact. So there's a lot of additional content that I've even yet to explore. So I beat the base game. I've done some of the additional content, but this is one that I really dove into the rabbit hole watching people's video essays, speedrunning content. I've even got to the things like the Path of Pain and all the additional kind of bosses, but it's a difficult curve, and I think I like that about the game. Like as you progress through, there are some serious challenges and DLCs that you really have to just kind of understand and learn and use all the mechanics to your best ability. But again, I can see why this falls in a classic Metroidvania title. Speaking of Metroidvanias, I followed up the Hollow Knight, several month-long obsession with yet another Metroidvania, and I took it back to a classic, literal Metroid game. And it was a game that I didn't get to play in its release, and that was Metroid Dread. So I went to the Switch in this case for Metroid Dread, and this was more of a better late than never sort of thing for me. And this was a game I had a lot of fun with. This is a game that I didn't really know much about, and I had seen some footage and some streamers play, but I knew the basic elements behind a Metroid game. So this is one that I think really delivered in terms of its control, the difficulty curve as well in this one, and the really great kind of like map design that came with Metroid Dread. Again, another game where you can get certain areas if you know how to use certain abilities, the abilities at the surface are just, you know, a scratch of what you can technically do with them when you like use them in a specific way, or if you really learn the intricacies of how some of the abilities work that allow you to get to different areas in your map sooner or skip entire areas. Like, again, another game similar to Hollow Knight, where after diving into it after my first playthrough before starting my second one, watching how speedrunners completely like break the game, and not even in a glitchless way or a glitch way, but breaking the game in terms of like using the abilities in ways that I even think possible. And again, one of those games that in the beginning very confusing with the map and the system, but more and more as I played through it, everything just kind of clicked. And I think the story was great, the overall bosses were great. Again, all in all, just a really great Metroid game, and Metroidvania at that. So if you've never really played a Metroid game, I think Dread is a fun Metroid game to get into, especially since it's on the Switch. And then we took a break from Metroid games, and I wanted to dive into something a little bit different, and we went with Wallor. The best way I can describe Wallor is like it's tower defense slash kind of like a roguelite is like the best way I can put it. It's a vertical tower defense like sort of game where you control this robotic spider that's kind of your miner. You enter mines as you climb the wall up or down, and you go in mines to collect resources that then you can use to power up your abilities and gain new weapons, because in between waves you have to fight off enemies, and you can kind of, you know, take this risk of getting more resources or protecting your spider, which is your main you know, lifeline. And it's a game that's so simple in its aesthetic and you know, kind of overall controls, but truthfully just one of those addicting gameplay loops in my opinion. I was a big fan of tower defense games growing up, and this kind of filled that itch. It's very, very akin to like a Dome Keeper, which is the original game that I had seen with this kind of style of gameplay that I want to try out. I just so happened to see that Wallor was on sale at the time, picked it up, and it is initially like a short campaign. Once you kind of get the campaign, you can beat the game very quickly. You know, like a 10-20 hour sort of game. But there was a DLC that came out. I got that and had a lot of fun with that as well. So there's a little bit of replay value after the fact if you're just going for like difficulty or the highest score possible, kind of like an endless wave sort of situation. But it is a game that, like, after I beat the original game and the DLC, I just had to hang it out for a little bit because I had played it so many times in a short period of time. But I do jump back into it now and again. I think I have like one more achievement in Steam that I need to get for a full completion, so I'll be looking to do that hopefully before the end of the year. But if you're looking for kind of like a mindless, just relaxing sort of tower defense meets roguelite, might be worth checking out Wallor. Later in the year, I took some time to just revisit a classic. I think sometimes it's always nice in a year to kind of take a step back and look at games that maybe you've completed before, see if there's any new updates. But for me, it was a game that really got me back into gaming. It's one I talk about a lot, and it was eventually how I started this channel, because if it wasn't for this game, I wouldn't really get into games again, and wouldn't lead me into collecting for video games as a whole. And that was Celeste, a highly, highly popular, it's not even a hidden gem at this point, indie game that is just a really great platformer with precision controls, and a game that really, you know, kind of rewards trying again and again, and you know, kind of getting things right, but also has a really big speedrunning community and you know, element to the game where you do have to be quick and you do have to be precise in certain areas, and one that can start out simple but quickly ramp up in difficulty depending on how you want to take it. So I want to revisit this classic because I had never really completed the B-side and the C-side tapes in Celeste and like fully complete the game. I've beaten the game a couple times, so I came back to revisit those other tapes and those other sides at the more difficult levels, only to figure out that, you know what, I had been just so far removed from the game for a while that I just decided to replay the whole game and then get into the B and C side tapes again. But I've had a lot of fun just revisiting this now and again and trying to beat some of those harder levels. So it's just one that I come back to every now and again, and a game that, as simple as it is, just really effective, and again, a really popular indie game for a reason. Another game I would be remiss to not put on the list because it's arguably one of the games I probably paid the most in just terms of like downtime, and it's a game that I hate to love, and it's NBA 2K25. Look, I know a lot of people, if you've heard about the 2K series, they just kind of repaint the same thing from years pass and add a little bit of improved graphics, new players, some animations, and I get it, and I agree. And then it becomes a whole money pit thing with like my player and all the money you can sink into it. I like these games just for the single player element of like my NBA, the GM mode, and building your own league. Ever since like NBA Live series and then the 2K series, it's the game mode I've always been able to sink a lot of time in as a basketball fan and a sports enthusiast. I love the element of like building a team and dealing with like salary cap and dealing with like constructing a championship team and all these different elements that go into it. So it's not the game mode that anybody by any stretch of imagination typically gets these games for, but I have a lot of fun doing it. So it's easily one of the games I played the most on my PlayStation 5 this year. That takes me to October this year, where I took some time to dive into multiple horror games and just kind of, be on brand and on theme. But the one horror game that stuck out for me was the Dead Space remake. This is a game I've been wanting to play for so long because admittedly I never got to play the original Dead Space on the Xbox 360. So playing the remake, I got to experience the obviously improved graphics and sound design and a lot of the remade or enhanced elements. Again, I didn't play the original, but from my understanding, a lot of people said that the remake was not just true to it, but it improved on the areas and control aspects that made that initial game a little bit more difficult or tedious or annoying. So in my experience, it was a great story, amazing ambiance that really throws you in this Ishimura, this kind of abandoned ship with these foreign characters, and it was like appropriately difficult. This is a game I decided to play on a harder difficulty just to kind of challenge myself from the start. Typically when I play single player games, I'll gravitate towards like a normal to medium depending on the title sort of difficulty curve, just because I want to experience the story and not be too frustrated in the gameplay. But this is one where I try to push myself, and I've seen that after you beat it, you unlock the even more difficult functions and difficult features. And with that, there's like a challenger. Essentially, it's like an Iron Man mode where like you can't die at all throughout your gameplay, and it's limited saves, which is crazy. But yeah, I love the weapon customability, the upgrades, and kind of experimenting with different solutions and stuff like that, and just how the game kind of keeps you on your toes throughout. So Dead Space Remake, if you haven't played it, or you have played the original, the remake is 100% worth it. Check it out. And the last game on my list here is actually none other than Call of Duty Black Ops 6. And this is a recent addition. This is one that I picked up recently only because it was free on Game Pass. I told myself this year I'm not going to buy the Call of Duty game because I always buy it for a week, play with friends, and then never pick it up again. But since this was free on Game Pass, I decided to give it a try. And funny enough, this has just been one of those games for me that was like a stressful de-stressor, if that makes any sense. It's almost a paradox where it's like, it's a nice game that when I get home I can spend an hour and just relax and play this. And I say relax, but you know how Call of Duty games go. But yeah, it's been a fun, stressful de-stressor, and it's one of the few multiplayer games on my list this year, if not the only multiplayer game on my list this year. And this is just something I've had fun just playing by myself as well, just jumping in free-for-all lobbies and getting a game in here and there, completing daily challenges. And I think it's that element of like the camo grinds and the attachment grinds and the prestiging that keeps me a little bit more hooked this time around, just because it's something that I can, sink a couple hours into every here and there. So Black Ops 6, I'm like second prestige already right now, so I've been having a lot of fun with that and just getting the games in here and there while I can. So yeah, 2024 had a couple of games new and old for me, some classics that I finally got to try out. Obviously this list is a ideal version of the things that stuck out to me throughout the year. A couple honorable mentions. There's a lot of other games I've tried out, picked up, didn't complete throughout the year. Zelda Oracle of Ages on the retro side was a game that I've been playing pretty exclusively on my analog pocket. Hades 2 is another game that I picked up earlier this year, the alpha, since it was so highly anticipated. Dive into it every now and again just to kind of see what's going on there, but I'm waiting for that kind of complete package to fully give some time to it. In terms of retro games, I've picked up and tried out a bunch of different retro games throughout the year in terms of stuff I've bought, things I've emulated and whatnot. I've been playing some Typing of the Dead recently that I got when I got a Sega Dreamcast keyboard, and a variety of other kind of classic series, the Guitar Hero series. Ocarina of Time is another one that I picked up earlier this year to kind of run through a full playthrough again. So yeah, a mix of retro titles, but nothing that's truly like stand out. As far as what I'm looking forward to, there's a couple DLCs, like I said, coming out for some games that I do need to check out. Final Fantasy 16 had a couple that I never got to play. Obviously, like I mentioned, Stellar Blade has some that I'll probably pick up. And then outside of like DLCs, there's just a lot of games in general that came out this year and still coming out. Astrobot, Zelda, Echoes of Wisdom are two games that I have that, with the exception of Echoes of Wisdom, I've yet to play. Astrobot is still literally wrapped up, sealed. Silent Hill 2. Games like that came out this year that I still want to play and are still on my list. But in truth, I'm trying to be more conscientious of getting new games until I'm ready to play them. They're not going anywhere unless they're limited edition or collector's edition sort of things. And I'm trying to get better at not just buying every new game that comes out because I'll eventually play it, and just getting it when I'm actually in the mood and ready to play it. So a lot of fun this year going through some of these games, and it's fun to look back and see some of the titles that really stuck out to me. Again, I want to do these more in real time and giving some thoughts, reviews, maybe even some video essays in the future. It's the whole reason I started this channel. But I thought would be a good way just to kind of brain dump everything here and take a look at the games that I enjoyed playing throughout 2024 thus far. I'm sure. And look, I know there's a lot of other great games and DLCs that came out this year, like the Elden Ring DLC. There was Wukong Black Myth that came out this year, Animal Well on the indie side, games like Balatro. A lot of games that I either have or are still in the backlog that I just haven't yet got to dive into. But this is just my list of what I did sort out this year. I think next year I'll have hopefully a more methodical approach to some of these things, but as always, and with video games in general, especially when you have the retro and the modern, there's a lot out there. So hopefully being more intentional and conscientious of the games that I'm getting and playing, and as always, trying to make an effort to play more, because look, as great as it is collecting, and I collected a lot this year in terms of games, retro and modern, I do want to be the collector who plays these games and doesn't just have them sitting on shelves. So that's one thing I am trying to be more, again, intentional with going into 2025. And a list like this reminds me to do just that. So, ladies and gentlemen, gamers, leave down in the comments below what your favorite games that you played this year were. Some that surprised you, whether they're modern or old or retro or what have you. Throw it down in the comments below and throw in what you're looking forward to playing as well. And with that, happy gaming. Catch you in the next one.